And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 2 of the Push Start Podcast. How is it going, everybody? My name is DeMarco, and we have a lot of stories today. Tons. There is so much that has happened this week. It's a little nuts. A little nuts. Not a lot of nuts. A little nut. Like, maybe peanuts. Actually, maybe more like walnuts. But a lot of really exciting things, some weird things. Of course, CES. Does anybody follow CES closely enough? Or do you just sort of take out the tidbits? Lancelot, welcome. It's good to see you again. Welcome back. I'm always happy to have you here. Chris Harris, step away as much as you need to, but thank you for stopping by. Fark you and Grey Monad. Hello, hello. And thank you, Grey Monad, for spelling it right. Fark you know what you did. You know what you did. But we have a lot of really interesting things going on. Morgan, hello and welcome. You've watched a lot of CES coverage. So, we're going to be talking about some things. In fact, one of my opening stories is from coming out of CES. And Jonas, thank you for not being here. I appreciate you never being here as usual. So, Morgan, maybe you could walk us through, because, you know, one of the things that I wanted to start off with, of course, we're going to open up with bite-sized bits, some small stories that we can cover in about 5 minutes or less. I say about because I'm good at tangents. I'm trying to channel my inner Red Wolf Renegade, which, if, for most of you here, I know you watch both channels, but if you somehow do not, every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, you can check me out on the Renegade Realm podcast. Speaking of Renegade, we got some Mass Effect stuff we're going to talk about. Small little story, but we're going to be getting to that at the end of the show. So stay tuned. I'm very grateful to have each and every one of you here. But Morgan, let me know your favorite news from CES. I'm curious if you've been really watching a lot of it. I've been passively involved in it. I guess I get more of the gaming / some of the technology stuff that's coming. So, I'm really curious what you found most interesting. And today's episode is, of course, sponsored by... Not actually. Say it with me. Plain White Mug. And we have, of course, a new flavor of absinthe and tea that we are trying. Absinthe and tea. I love absinthe. I love tea. I didn't get that joke. Holly was here last week and she said, I love absinthe and tea. And it just went... There you go, Red. Welcome, Red. Plain White Mug. 4K 27-inch OLEDs. Yes! Speaking of OLEDs, Xbox is coming to LG OLED TV. LG OLED? Or just LG TVs. Xbox is coming to LG TVs. We have plenty of Xbox news that we're going to dive into. So we're not going to jump into that just yet. But 27-inch OLEDs. 4K. 4K, they're pretty, you know what, TVs, it's great to see that TVs are actually pretty cheap now. The TV is, in fact, an Xbox too. It's crazy. Look, I'm holding an Xbox. I'm drinking out. In fact, I have 2 drinkable Xboxes. I keep both on hand at different times. They're all Xboxes. I'm an Xbox. I think we had this conversation last week. You're an Xbox. I'm an Xbox. Cole is the biggest Xbox. We established that. Nobody could beat Cole as the biggest Xbox. Alcohol and tea, a great combination. No, absinthe. Alcohol and tea. I've never tried any alcohol and tea. Honestly, I don't... You can make some good combinations, I'm sure. But today we have salted caramel, which it smells delicious. So I'm really excited. Salted caramel from Absinthe and Tea, not sponsored. But I would be. Is this an Xbox? The new I Am Groot? No, you know what I think it's from? You know what I really think it's from? Is somebody at Microsoft played the Stanley Parable Ultra Deluxe. And then there's a whole, if you've never played the Stanley Parable, there's a whole segment about, is this a bucket? And then they ask, is this a bucket? And you have to decide whether or not it's a bucket. And the thing of a bucket will go by and you say yes or no, it's not a bucket. There's 2 buttons to push. I think somebody watched that segment and went, huh? This is an Xbox. This is an Xbox. That's an Xbox. You're an Xbox. Well, try some absinthe and tea, salted caramel. There's also, if you try anything from absinthe and tea, the one that I can speak really highly of is, I said this last week as well, Irish whiskey cream, I think it's called. Irish cream whiskey, something along those lines. It is delicious flavor tea. One of my favorites. One of my new favorites. Anyway, Valve opening up Steam OS to other devices. Yes, we could start off with that. Valve is doing what I think Microsoft is trying to do. Just there you go, Jonas. You understand. Do you have Norwegian whiskey? It's called a latte. Red. It's called a latte. That's a normal thing. You filthy milk drinker. We have the Skyrim music in the background. You filthy milk drinker. Anyway, yes, LG, I think that Steam is doing probably one of the best jobs by getting themselves across multiple devices. This is huge. This is huge. And thank you, Morgan, for bringing this up. It's massive for Steam to make sure that they're partnering with all these devices. Steam, of course, has their own system, but it's what's interesting is people are freaking out at Microsoft, right? Because they're worried about the dilution of the Xbox brand, mainly because these are people who love their consoles. Now, I'm not someone who cares about consoles. Look, I play on PC. I play Xbox games on my PC with my PlayStation controller, all right? That is the absolute most console agnostic you can possibly get, in my opinion. I do have a PlayStation 5. I do not own an Xbox Series X or X because, of course, I can play most of the Xbox games on my PC. But Steam, nobody's batting an eye that Steam is opening to other platforms. Why? Because as PC players, we're sort of used to having multiple different storefronts on our platform. So Steam, of course, they have their Valve, their Steam Deck, which you would think, hey, why are they trying to get other people to play on the Lenovo? Why wouldn't they just want to center all of that attention? Let's make myself big for this here. Why would they not want to center all of that attention on the Steam Deck? Make sure that Steam games are playable just there. But of course, Lenovo has the advantage of you could get, for example, Xbox Game Pass on it, I believe. So you can play your Xbox library, you'll be able to play your Steam library, and it really is becoming this all-in-one system. And the more that Steam is able to get themselves on different platforms, the better. Same with Xbox, right? So I'm not saying it's the exact same strategy because, of course, Steam is not reliant on console sales. Xbox is trying to be less reliant on console sales as well, which I will annoy some people. However, and feel free to disagree with me in chat. I know Assassin, if we were on the Renegade Realm podcast, Assassin would be getting mad at me for saying this, but I think that Xbox, personally, I think that Xbox has a good strategy that's coming from a console or a PC player, excuse me. Infinity, welcome Infinity to the show. Is mayonnaise an Xbox? No, but mustard actually is, not mayonnaise. So is sauerkraut. Sauerkraut's an Xbox as well. You gotta give the Germans more credit. Hello, Holly, that blue number, have a great stream. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to it. Playing Mass Effect. There's certain games, Morgan, there's certain games on handheld. For like, if I were to ever play an unmodded Skyrim, perfect to do it on a handheld. You feel the itch, you want to explore, jump into Skyrim on your Lenovo Go, on your Steam Deck, on your Xbox handheld that we know is coming. All of that stuff sounds great. Speaking of consoles, Xbox and Sony, one thing that I was pretty excited to dive into here is actually the idea that one thing coming out of CES, there's a lot of interesting things coming out of CES. We knew this technology was coming. Have you guys heard about this? Sony debuting tech at CES where you could smell the scents of what's going on in the game, and they specifically featured with The Last of Us. Have you ever wanted to know what dirty, disgusting, sweaty Ellie smells like as she's running away from the horror? Have you ever wanted to get that real scent of Joel's sweater in The Last of Us 2, which just takes that deep in? Now you can with Sony Smeller Vision. I know that was an April Fool's joke. You'd think it was an April Fool's joke. It's not, it's true. There was a Nintendo Switch ad that came out where it was a parody. Someone made a joke about the Nintendo Switch, and they were laughing about how, oh, you can get you can get, what is it? You can smell Princess Peach's armpits or something. Because everybody's really wanted to smell that, right? I was curious. I was curious what kind of deodorant she wears. Now you can find out. That was a joke. But no, actually, this is a thing that they've been working on for a while, though, right? This technology in and of itself isn't actually new. And the reason why we know that is because... one, movie theaters were kind of experimenting with it, right? I think it was either AMC or Regal. They were playing around with the idea of releasing scents in the theaters. That, of course, is more difficult because you have a massive space. There's actually machines for D&D where if you are playing D&D, you could have a particular scent come out, which is pretty damn cool, in my opinion, especially as a DM or someone who does DM. You can have those smells. But now with PlayStation, if you've ever want to know what a clicker smells like when it's after you, you can have that opportunity possibly sometime in the future. Hey, I'm curious. I would dabble in it. I'm a sucker for those types of things, you know? I'm a sucker. Like, when the haptics came out for the PlayStation 5 controller, that's actually the reason why I prefer this controller, because I like the haptics in it. I'm gonna be honest, you can't stay away from me that long, Jonas. You can't stay away from me that long. Some peace and quiet. I know. It was nice, wasn't it? Sonya's spending more on movies and games. Keep that article in the back of your head. We'll get to that at the end. At the end of all this, I always like to sort of go into a segment where we talk about in other news, which is where we can talk about TV, games, books, other forms of media, that sort of thing. But that's interesting. They're spending more on TV. Speaking of TV, of course, one of the news stories that came out recently, I'm sure you've heard about this, was Helldivers, right? And maybe that's where this was tied into. Yep, there you go, Morgan. Right on the same page. Helldivers 2. They're making a movie, which I love the concept of Helldivers. Of course, we got that with Starship Troopers. We'll dive into that towards the end of the show. So remind me if I do forget and if you're still here. But thank you all so much for joining. It's great to see you all. I know it was just going on about smelling Peach's feet. Listen, I like gimmicks. That's what I was saying. I like gimmicks. I like these controllers. I like gimmicks. The smell-o-vision, I would buy into it. I would absolutely buy into it. All right. Some other stories. Not all is going well in the games industry, unfortunately. We want to hope that would be an interesting thing in Smell-O-Vision 1. Helldivers 2 with Smell-O-Vision. Exactly, Fark. If you have one of those bugs explode and you're right in proximity, I want to smell whatever that would be. You know, it's like you've ever done Bean Boozled? You've ever done Bean Boozled? I swear to God, they stick more of the disgusting jelly beans in there than the good jelly beans. They're terrible. I just had them recently. There was burnt rubber in one of them. Ugh. It was cool. It was really cool that they had burnt rubber because they got the flavor right. Anyway, things aren't all good. Well, we do have some great stories, some interesting things coming out of CES, LG TVs, Smell-O-Vision. What else? I know, Morgan, you brought up Kingdom Hearts on handheld is amazing. I've never played a Kingdom Hearts game. That's on my to-do list. It is on my to-do list. Valve opening up Steam OS. That came out around the same time. Is this some off-brand? It's like the Harry Potter Birdie Bots every flavored beans, Jonas. It's like it. It's like it, but it was it actually came first, was Bean Boozled. And it was just, you would have 2 jelly beans that look exactly the same. One would be licorice, one would be burnt rubber, one would be peach, one would be dead fish, one would be banana smoothie, the other, looking exactly the same, would be old wound bandage or something. Those are all real flavors that are included in there. You always wanted the blue one. The blue one would either be like, I don't know, raspberry or toothpaste. But of course toothpaste is just mint. So you'd always go for the blue one for a palate cleanser. That's the strategy. So there you go. I always eat my fish dead. Yeah, well, rotten fish. Rotten fish. Let's rephrase. You've never just... you're from Norway. I'm pretty sure that you guys just reach your hands into the river and then just... That's what they've done. That's what they've done in... That's what they've done with the Sons of the Forest. Shadows delayed again. Shadows delayed again. Shadows delayed. Shadows. Please clarify. What am I? Assassin's Creed. Thank you. Sorry. Assassin's Creed. Thank you guys. The delay is for the best. There's a lot of discussion. We could dive into this for a little bit. There's a lot of discussion around the impact that Assassin's Creed Shadows has for Ubisoft. Recently, I was seeing posts that were coming out discussing how what was the nonsensical quote? Let's see. Ubisoft is investor pleasing. It was like Ubisoft is trying to get investment pleasers. Here, Ubisoft hires advisors to pursue strategic opportunities and capitalistic options that best suit the future of the company and deliver value to shareholders. In other words, here, let's get the full cam. Let's get the full cam for this one. We're screwed. Right? In other words, they're in some big trouble. It's difficult to know the true weight that Assassin's Creed Shadows is having for the company. The delay is probably needed. It seems like it's at one of those points where, you know what, we need... What Starfield did, right? Starfield had multiple delays because they wanted to make sure that it came out the gate clean and polished. And to its credit, it came out very polished. That game did come out pretty polished. So that was pretty neat to see. And I like that. And if Assassin's Creed Shadows comes out with those problems, plus people have both short and long memories. And of course, I'm sure some folks are still going to be upset about the samurai situation that came up maybe about a month back or so, where they were upset about the protagonist and the lack of historical authenticity that was appearing in the game. Specifically, that was coming from, I believe, the Japanese community, where they wanted their history and their heritage to be accurately represented. So people have long memories. They need this game to come out right. Let them have that. And of course, the season is busy. The 2025 is a juggernaut. 2025 is a juggernaut for titles. We have over 27 games that we already know of. Shinobi just shared this. We're going to take a look at this in a bit. Shinobi just shared this. But over 27 games that we already know are confirmed. That's not including the titles coming from Nintendo. Of course, more hidden surprises. And things such as, like, the Oblivion remake weren't on that list because they're not formally announced. But we know it's probably very likely or very strongly coming either this year or maybe next year. So, lots going on. And of course, if we don't get the Oblivion remake this year, we're going to see, we're going to be seeing Skyblivion for us PC gamers and PC modders out there. Starfield is the best because of it too. Starfield is the best it can be because of it. Most races eat some type of rotten fish. Jeremy, have you had rotten fish before? Is that you projecting? It's Corpo speak for we don't know what we're doing and we need to look like we are in front of our shareholders. 100%. 1000%. Ubisoft is in a downward spiral. They're trying to figure it out. And for what it's worth, Assassin's Creed Shadows. Now, I have not played an Assassin's Creed game formally. I'm not the best to talk about this subject simply because, while I keep up with the news and I see what's going on, I haven't played an Assassin's Creed game since Assassin's Creed 3. I played a little bit of Black Flag, but I have not played since Assassin's Creed 3. And what I didn't even know, to the point where I didn't even know that the way that they were tackling Assassin's Creed Shadows was that they were going to have each protagonist, the male protagonist was going to be the samurai, like the more RPG style, and the female protagonist was going to go more the traditional route, which I think is an incredible way to handle it. Honestly, that's incredibly smart, and I would love to see them carry that through for future games, so you could kind of get the old style format with the new style format for whoever has those preferences, right? Personally, I prefer the older style games because that's what I grew up on, but I know a lot of people like the RPG mechanics, so let them have their delay. I always say delays aren't the worst thing in the world, assuming that the time is used responsibly. Speaking of irresponsible, we have, unfortunately, some layoffs that are going around in the industry, both from Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League, which is not doing well as the Frostpunk creators, 8-bit studios. So this is one that hurts a little bit, especially because I loved Frostpunk 2. I thought it was one of my favorite games, but unfortunately they are being hit with some layoffs. 11-bit studios, I don't know if I said 8-bit. 11-bit studios was hit with some layoffs, and they were working on something called Project 8. Now, we don't know much about Project 8. 11-bit is also working on another game, not the Replaced, where is it? It's somewhere here. The Alters. They're also working on the Alters, so they have more projects coming out, but this is amongst, they had some development struggles. So Assassin's Creed Shadows taking time to delay the game, try to make it better. When other projects get hit by delays, unfortunately, they are not so lucky. This is one of those cases where 11-bit Studios was working on this Project 8. It was a narrative, story-driven game, and they specifically stated here, quote, "It was conceived under very different market conditions when narrative-driven, story-rich games held stronger appeal." So, insinuating that story-rich games do not have the same pull that they once did, which I think if you look at the success of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, which is an open-world adventure action game that's very heavily story-driven, that is single-player, a little bit, right? Now, the studio did get hit with multiple delays. They had budgets, of course, increased over time. Projections for sales went down, and they ultimately said, we're not going to be able to release this game. And at the end of that, they did lay off some of their staff. Now, they said that over 50% are going to be moved to other projects to help support that. The other ones were going to be assisted as much as possible with severance pay, as well as I think they were going to give counseling to some of those employees that were affected, which is a good gesture, especially when, especially in the United States, there's definitively some mental health crises going on. So that was pleasant to see as much as they possibly could. They also cited COVID-19 as struggles. Now, I don't know if I 100% disagree with this, or disagree. I don't know if I 100% agree with the claim that story-rich games can't sell. Story-rich games, that's exactly what Sony's bread and butter market is for the most part, right? Games like The Last of Us 2, games like Uncharted. Of course, Naughty Dog being a huge pioneer, and now they're working on their next project with their new sci-fi title. Indiana Jones is the example I just stated. And of course, people still go back to titles like, I think you could cite games such as the Arkham franchise, Shadow of Mordor, that came from WB Games. So plenty of single-player titles can do well. Are they more difficult? Probably. Do they have a little bit more going uphill for them than, say, a live service game? Not really. You think about the amount of live service games that have come out, and many of them aren't doing well. Suicide Squad is the example. Of course, you have the Sony one, Concord, that didn't do very well. So then for every 5 live service titles that you do have come out, you have one Marvel Rivals. I would argue maybe even more than that, right? For every 7 to 10 live service attempts, you get one Marvel Rivals. So it's a challenging slope. I don't know if they're 100% accurate on this one, but there you go. So unfortunately, layoffs here. Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League also is getting hit with layoffs. This is a second round. They cut 50% of their QA team in the past, which was during development. That sucks. On the Ubisoft side, X-Defiant, exactly, Morgan, X-Defiant as well. So there's a lot of these live service titles that they seem like good ideas, and we know that Sony scaled that back as well. They had a lot more that they're working on. Think of The Last of Us 2. That's a project that people are probably going to quickly forget about, but they were having The Last of Us multiplayer element that not anymore, right? Because these live service multiplayer projects, he's not, to 11-Bit's credit, they're not insinuating that's what they would have done instead, that I'm jumping to live service, but I just think that you're ultimately in a competitive market is what it comes down to. Arcane Realm, gotta go. Much love to everyone here. Thank you so much for stopping by. Appreciate having you here, and I hope that you could catch the end of the stream. Suicide Squad as well, having layoffs. 50% of their QA team. Now they're going into their last season, which is going to have Deathstroke. The player count is really quite bad. They're at 630 players, so not doing well, all things considered. And it's unfortunate to see what's happening to Rocksteady. But for most people, I think the bigger concern is arguably, what does this mean for their next project? We know that WB Games wants to double down on the Batman IP and games like Hogwarts Legacy and Harry Potter. So where is Rocksteady in particular going to go? That remains to be seen. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it went dirt cheap on Steam. And in fact, some people are saying it's just going to go free to play very, very soon. Once this last season comes out, they might even make it free to play with the final season in tandem with when Deathstroke comes out. So it's just an unfortunate thing where, you know, the studio didn't want to, really didn't want to make the game. They did. It came out lackluster. Yeah, $349, lowest recorded price, 95% off $349, which is right here. You can see current price $70, lowest price $350. There you go, US dollars. So there you go. All right, next bite-sized bit. I know a lot of people don't care about this, so we'll get through this topic pretty quickly. But VR and AR. VR and AR is a really tricky thing. It's hard to sell a lot of people on VR games. You think about when you market some of them, you just can't project the experience of what it's like to be in a VR headset onto a commercial, onto an advertisement, into a banner ad, all these sorts of things, right? Into a game showcase. It's hard to really convey that. Well, MetaQuest is now, they are hemorrhaging money. They are currently, what's the amount? I have my notes here. They lost $16.1 billion. That's billion with a B. $16.1 billion in 2022. $13.7 billion in 2023. $12.7 billion. These are losses, by the way, consecutive losses in the current fiscal year. 12.7 billion. And their last quarter earnings were down over $4 billion just in this last quarter. And this is the same platform that just got Arkham Shadow as a platform exclusive for the MetaQuest VR. Ow! Yikes! And this is simultaneous when Apple is halting production. They had a $1,500 Apple Vision Pro VR headset that they were going to release. They completely canceled production on that. As a fan, as a confidant in VR titles, it's a shame to see this type of stuff happening, because I think it's such a cool medium. And there's certain experiences, like, for example, The Walking Dead Saints and Sinners is an incredible VR experience. But unfortunately, when stories like this keep coming out, studios, publishers, investors, they're all going to lose faith in VR as a medium. And this is exactly why I think it's too early for things. When I complain about exclusive titles, especially on the VR front, it's unfortunate to see because of reasons like this. Because a game like Arkham VR is not going to sell well when the MetaQuest is losing this much money, when people aren't engaging with VR. You first need to get people in the overall feel of VR to think, hey, I would go out and buy a VR headset. They've become more acceptable as far as price goes, especially if you go with things like the MetaQuest. But unfortunately, it's hard to convince people to buy it. Unless you have the space you can dedicate, it's not going to be used as much as you think. Yeah, and unless you have the games. And things such as this are not going to convince people, right? Sony had their VR headset come out. Microsoft decided we're not even going to bother making one. And honestly, right, in their defense, I would say rightfully so. If this is what the market is going to be, if they would have had a similar story to what Sony did. Let's talk Starfield DLC. It's coming out in VR, Red. It's not coming out in VR. But Skyrim VR is actually a really cool example of VR as well. All right, and two of our last bite-sized bits, a good VR Star Wars PC game. Morgan, if you've never checked out, there's it's probably not, you can't do the multiplayer, but there was a Star Wars X-Wing game that I actually played in VR, and it is incredibly cool to experience being in the TIE Fighter, being in an X-Wing and flying these ships around, of course, from that first-person perspective. It is incredibly cool to play. I forget the exact name of it. Star Wars, it might have just been Squadrons. Thank you, Red. Star Wars Squadrons is playable in VR, and it was a very cool experience indeed. Vader. I've not been able to experience Vader. Welcome, the elemental hero, the Shadow Link Dragon Wolf King. Please keep adding names onto that. Don't forget Vader. Don't forget about you. Don't forget about me. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for being here tonight as well. So there's definitely some cool VR experiences, but it's hard to sell them. And when studios are losing money like this, when they make exclusive deals, Vader wasn't exclusive as well. It just doesn't get people willing to buy into the platforms, right? If someone said, hey, I would maybe invest in an expensive VR headset, but oh, Batman Arkham Shadow is locked to the MetaQuest. Well, I don't really want, I'd rather get a more premium feeling VR headset. Oh, I can't play Metro Awakening looks really cool. Can't play Vader on this system. When you start having exclusivity, same with Sony's, they're slowly implementing PC. I think the Horizon game probably would have been pretty cool if they saw it on PC. I know that the game itself was not the best VR experience as far as reviews said. It was middling. A Star Wars Battlefield game or something. I would like to see that. You can do that too. Again, Red mentioned Metro Awakening. Even Valve's own Half-Life, Alex, was considered one of the best VR experiences. So there's definitely potential out there. There's definitely a lot that it can do. But as Jonas said, it's going to be, for the foreseeable future, an enthusiast's platform. Which is a shame. And I pay a lot of respect to any studio that does try to push in that direction. Two more smaller stories before we move on. The first one, if you've been playing Marvel Rivals, really fun game. Really fun. We were just talking about the success of it. Marvel Rivals is getting their season 1. So if you have been enjoying it, I have. It's better than Overwatch 2, I can tell you that much. If you've been craving that hero shooter, if you've wanted Overwatch to feel fun again, check out Marvel Rivals. It is a really great time, especially when you play with friends and you start learning what characters you each play. You get good synergy, good team ups. That's when it hits peak, absolute peak. I just got yelled at in Rivals for trying to play. For trying to play. I talked about this on the Renegade Realm podcast. I was playing Black Panther. It was my first time playing Pack Lanther. And I was getting yelled at because I was doing terribly. And these guys over the microphones were like, Black Panther, get the F out of here. Change your hero. They blame me, of course, for losing the game, but in my defense, if they were so good they would have been able to work around me playing as Black Panther. I didn't realize that I was playing in competitive. I honestly thought I was in casual. So they have that going for them. Rest in peace that round. If they're so good and they're in their diamond and platinum ranks, then they'll be able to grow from one loss anyway. So there you go. Heard it has a good single player. There's been rumors that Marvel Rivals will consider a single player or a PvE side to it, which would be cool. Maybe they could succeed where Overwatch 2 completely and utterly dropped the ball, because of course the single player, the PvE elements were the things that was the justification for an Overwatch 2, and then they said, nah, it's too hard, and I don't really feel like it, and they couldn't figure it out. Somehow Blizzard makes so. Somehow they could not figure out how to make single player work, even though they had good small single player bits in the past. So there you go. Season 1 for Marvel Rivals. They are going to be including 3 new maps. 2 are coming at the launch of the season. 1 is coming mid-season. 4 new characters. The Fantastic Four are going to be making their way to the game. You have Invisible Woman and Mr. Fantastic available at launch. And then Human Torch and The Thing are going to be coming in the mid-season updates. There's a new Doom match mode. It sounds like Team Deathmatch if I'm understanding it correctly. But there's going to be an 8 to 12 player match. That is also coming for Season 1. And of course, there's going to be a whole slew of cosmetics and other things that come with it too, if that's up your alley. I don't like microtransactions or cosmetics. And in fact, I think they're doing like $20 for certain skins in that game, which is absolutely and utterly ludicrous. And for that reason alone, I will never buy one of their microtransaction skins, unless I get it with some of their in-game currency, which is not very liberally given for obvious reasons. So there you go. Lots to look forward to for Marvel Rivals. Hopefully they keep up, and based on the player count and the success and the praise that game has been getting, I think it's going to have a fairly strong couple first seasons. We'll see when they get to around Season 4 and 5 how they're still doing at that point. Oh, only 600, Morgan? Those are rookie numbers. Pick them up. All right, and our final bite-sized story for today that we're hopping into. This one is super, super quick. Yeah, Jesus Christ, they need to get more. Morgan needs more games in the library. Fuck you. Only 30 games. FarQ's not a real gamer. Only 30 games in the backlog. Time them out. Don't actually. Good for you, more. I guess Humble Bundle was probably right up your alley, if that's the case. Because Humble Bundle, not so much anymore, but they used to have some really, really good bundles there. Alright, fuck you. We'll see you in a bit. Oh, I remember Fanatical. I haven't used Fanatical in ages. Alright, last bite-sized story before we get into our 2 big ones for the day. Or 3 big ones, actually. We got 3 that I'm excited to talk about. Hitman. Red, you're gonna love this. Hitman just hit 75 million players. A new milestone for the game, which shows that, yeah, single-player games, they can still rock it. They can still kill it. And in fact, that is, again, to go back to the 8-bit story, they don't like narrative single-player games. I don't know if maybe Hitman isn't so much a narrative game, right? It's more of the sandbox. But welcome back, FarQ. Welcome to the Push Start Podcast. Maybe it's not the pinnacle of narrative-driven games, but single-player experiences. It just hit 75. It took a while to get there, of course. But congratulations to Hitman and the team. IO Interactive, I believe. Am I getting that right? Congratulations to the Hitman team for that incredible milestone. It's a title I have not yet played. I'm eager to, at some point, add that one to my backlog so it can sit. However, February, it's going to be tough. Why is it going to be tough? I hear you asking, because we have a beautiful Xbox Developer Direct Showcase that is coming January 26th. January 23rd, excuse me. But we're not getting into that story just yet. I'm sorry. I lied to all of you. I jumped the gun. I'm excited. That's later in the show tonight. For now, we're going to be jumping into... It's a teaser. See, that's a good do you feel teased? Did that get your hype up? Ready to go? Probably not. Anyway, Exodus. Exodus is a game the more that I hear about it, the more I'm very much looking forward to it. And I have some notes about Exodus. Let me get just a little bit of Exodus gameplay here on the screen so you guys have something fun to watch in the background. But Exodus just had some brand new info where they had a developer Q&A. And one of the cool things that this story is doing, of course, you have the benefit of being primarily led by some BioWare employees. That's super exciting. Let's find... Do we have some official... There we go. We'll do this one. A beautiful cinematic. Bring that over here. And we will full screen that over there. And then let's get it right up onto the screen for you guys. Exodus looks like a really cool game. What is Exodus? For those of you who don't know, let's dive into this a little bit, yeah? Exodus is a sci-fi game coming from Archetype. I have notes written on paper. Old school style. It's from Archetype Entertainment, which, interestingly enough, I didn't realize that I had seen this before, but I always forget that they're actually part of Hasbro, which is, of course, like Wizards of the Coast, D&D, Magic the Gathering, all of them. And it was founded in 2019, so it's almost been 6 years that this game has been in development. And it's by Olin, right? James Olin, I believe. James Olin. He's the former creative director at BioWare. And what's interesting about Olin in particular is he only accepted this deal because when they were founding the studio, Hasbro said you can have complete creative freedom over how you want to run it. You can have the complete and total control over the studio. We're going to let you have that freedom to run it as you want. And that was originally he was not, and he turned down deals from other studios that wanted to work with him, that wanted to hire him. He turned it down because he wanted the right opportunity. But this one got him on board. So this game is really, really special. Can we talk about Starfield? What's there to talk about? Starfield, you have another sci-fi game that potentially can do better than Starfield is. Talk about it. We're not talking about Starfield. There's nothing to talk about with Starfield. How about you guys can talk about Starfield in the chat? Yeah, Elemental. Yeah, this is a company that is a subsidiary of Hasbro, which is pretty interesting. So Olin has been at BioWare since the OG Baldur's Gate 3 games. And he did refuse multiple deals. Now, this attracted some talent from his former BioWare friends. You have Chad Robertson and Drew Caprichin, who, of course, Drew Caprichin is credited for a lot of the narrative elements of the original Mass Effect trilogy and some of the lore that is built there. So you can even see some of the Mass Effect influence, I think, if you watch and you really take a look at the aesthetic of Exodus. Even they have these pictures of Ark ships that left Earth, which look a little similar to the arcs from Mass Effect Andromeda. Like, there's definitely some of that interesting, crossover that you have here. Some of the ship designs, right, that more sleek aesthetic, definitely a far cry from the theme that Bethesda went with the Frostpunk. I think there's room for both. I personally like the sleeker, the more fantasy sci-fi approach to it. That's just my take. You're free to have your own and disagree with me, Red. But what's going on in the game? So, Mass Effect influence. Humans left Earth. They encountered alien life. So this takes place... The humans have expanded past Earth for a while. They're out there. They've explored. They've encountered alien races. There's, in fact, a race of humans, former humans, called the Celestials. They're like 15,000 years or something advanced, where they are so far evolved from the current wave of humanity that's sort of reaching the system that this game takes place in. They see themselves as different species entirely. So there's ancient civilizations from 15,000 years ago that were there. And there's even a whole prologue series that you can read on their website. And there's even a prequel book that was shared with us on last week's show from Chris Harris. So thank you for sharing that. I still have to check that out. But there's even an audiobook that you could check out on Audible if you are interested. So some of the new details for Exodus. Some of the new details. It takes place on a hub. There is a hub planet called Ladon. Now, instantly when I think of a hub planet or a hub location in a sci-fi fantasy-esque game, I immediately jump to, guess what? The Citadel. Now, the difference with this is time dilation. It's a Citadel, but with a twist. And this twist is time dilation, which is going to play a massive role in the game, where you play as a traveler, you go out, you explore, you're trying to work for the betterment of society, but what can ultimately happen is you can come back and then find yourself years in the future, decades even, where time has passed. And so the people that are there, whether it's family, it's friends, it's possibly, I don't know if they hinted at companions might be the same way, but there's a lot of things that can change based on how long you are away for missions. Now, what I'm not sure of is whether or not this does mean that it's the decisions you make that can tie into how long you're away. Is this just set story missions? For example, again, going back to the example of the Citadel, when you go away, you Mass Effect 3, you come back, you'll hear the NPCs talking about some different conversations, right? They might move to different places on the Citadel based on where you are in the story, those sorts of things. But that's always going to happen. It always plays out the exact same way every single time that you play Mass Effect. It's the same thing. With Exodus, they have an opportunity to do something really cool, which is based on the choices you make while you're on missions. Think Interstellar, right? Do you decide to hold out on a planet as long as possible, and then now suddenly you have 2 decades that have passed when you return? Do you decide we're going to evac and get out of there as soon as possible? Now only 1 decade has passed. So those sorts of changes and nuance are where I think a game like this can massively excel. The combat could be fine. It looks fun, but the combat could be fine. The story, preferably better. The exploration could be fine. Even we see the visuals. The visuals look pretty good. This is just a cinematic, but that was playing. Let's get that back up, actually. This is just a cinematic, but the game does look good. But even if it didn't, it could get away with a lot of those things. The choice and consequence can really carry it through, because of course, coming from old school BioWare veterans, that is sort of what we look to, and that's what we look for. It gives me a little bit of confidence when Olin is at the helm of this, because Olin, I believe when I was reading about him, it was someone that is working on Exodus. I believe it was Olin, was renowned for getting so much work as a D&D DM, because his storytelling was just that excellent. Of course, he worked on Baldur's Gate, the game, as well. So if they can incorporate that, and he still has that talent, and it hasn't, it's not sort of stuck in that old school game design, which based on what we're seeing, it's not. They have something really special in their hands. What else about Exodus? I got a couple more notes here that I'm excited to talk about. This is why any fans of The Witcher, this is why any fans of Mass Effect are really turning, or any fans of BioWare are turning to this studio, which is why I really wanted to cover it, because I myself am just diving into a lot of Exodus for the first time too. I saw it passively. I went, hey, that looks cool. And I keep diving, and then I pull out these nuggets of information. The fact that they already have so much lore that's available on their website is absolutely incredible as well, to see that. So they're really putting a lot of effort. You could tell that this isn't meant to be just a one-off game. Hasbro has confidence in the leadership. But not only that, Olin wants this to be a franchise. He wants this to be a universe, a franchise, a series that goes on. And they're setting it up based on the amount of world building that's going into it. So now, couple things too, and I'm curious what you... Let me put out a poll for this, actually. So Exodus is doing something... Let's go. As a one-person show, this makes it a little bit harder. It's a little bit harder sometimes. little bit hard sometimes, but Daedric, it is great to see you. Just Dom, also welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by to episode 2 of the show. It's great to have both of you here. Long time no see, Daedric, but hopefully see you around a little bit more. I'm curious to know. It's great to have you back. I'm glad that you're sticking around. I'm glad that you're here. Outer Worlds 2 and Avowed in the same year. Obsidian is cooking. Yeah. Yes, Morgan. Yes. We're going to talk about that a little bit during the Xbox Showcase segment. So, one thing, here's a poll for all of you. One thing that Exodus is doing is you are a pre-written character in the game. You have friends, you have family members that will be impacted by some of the decisions that you make. But it's like, it sounds like it's going to be a shepherd-like character, right? They have some sort of history ingrained with the world where they've existed and they've done things before you step into the shoes of this character. Now, of course, your choices are going to impact the story along the way, but my question to all of you is, do you want a character that comes in completely as a blank slate? Think Fallout New Vegas, or Fallout New Vegas actually gave you a bit of a backstory. Think Fallout 3, think Skyrim, think Oblivion, right? Where you're really just sort of jumping into this world and you're making your mark and telling your tale? Or do you want the character to have some kind of pre-existing notion or pre-existing life within the universe? I think of a Geralt of Rivia, right? Geralt's a perfect example of that, where you have someone that has been in the game for a while, and has their lore has their relationships, but you get to shape it out from there. I think there's room for both, personally. I'd rather have a backstory to this game. So, Elemental, you would probably be on the same page where it depends on the game, right? This is a type of game I think having a backstory might make sense. But that is going to be part of the thing. So one of the specific examples, the reason why I bring this up is one of the specific examples that they mentioned as part of this time dilation is you can go off on a mission. Again, a big question is, will your choices impact this, or will it play the same way every single time? But the other question too is they mentioned your friends and your family will be impacted by these time dilations. So if I'm going out on an excursion, those excursions, something in the middle for context, I would say is like Mass Effect, where it kind of comes up, but like your character has a background, right? No matter what you play as Shepard, you're kind of drafted into N7, but furthermore, you choose maybe a background, and then maybe it comes up a couple times during the game, but you don't really have too much else going on outside of that. Fallout 4, Daedric, Fallout 4 is a great example of some backstory. You were a ex-army, or if you played as the wife, Nora, you were a lawyer, I believe. But really outside of that, it doesn't matter. So Fallout 4 would be, I would say more like in the middle, I would say, is a Mass Effect original trilogy. The loose end of having a backstory would be Fallout 4. A bit of a stronger end of having a backstory would be The Witcher. Cyberpunk 2027 is another good example of somewhere in the middle, where you start off as the background, but then you kind of go in with something different. But yeah, the reason why I bring this up again, just to get back on topic, is because friends and family members will be impacted, is what they explicitly said. So as a character coming in with a backstory, I have my family in the game. I'm playing as the traveler. How is the game going to make me care about this family? That's always a struggle point for a lot of games, and it's always where you see some contention amongst reviewers, where you look at, some of them will say, well, I didn't give a crap about these characters, like, let them die. Oh, my family is 100 years old now? It is what it is. Like, fine, cool, whatever. Because there's just no attachment that gets pulled to them, versus whether or not they could pull that off. Some games can do it well, some games can't. I'm wondering where Exodus is going to fall on that strip. And the problem with something like that, for me as a gamer, right? This is very personal to me. The problem with that is that when you're trying to tell a very narrative-heavy driven story, moments such as that where they're trying to have this big impact, you come back to the planet name is, sorry, I have it, Lydon. When you come back and your parents are suddenly this old and they try to have this really emotional moment, and the developers are like, this is crazy and impactful, and look what's going on, and you're just sitting there with your controller going, okay. It's like that Saturday Night Live skit. Have any of you? There's a wonderful Saturday Night Live skit where like I think it's Ghostface calls, or just a serial killer's like open, or a knockoff of Saw, something like that, and they're like, open the door, and then there's like pizza outside for you, but the pizza guy's like stabbed or something, and he's just like, okay, and they're trying to make him terrified. Really great SNL skit. But something like that, right? You're sitting there, you're supposed to, it just doesn't hit, and then you sort of get pulled out of the game a little bit, especially for something that's supposed to be immersive, such as Exodus. So, most of you guys say somewhere in the middle. I agree. I personally, it depends on the game. When I go into an Elder Scrolls game, I want to be a blank slate. It's also important for lore and story. If this game feels off on its own lore and story, then the gamer possibly will leave the game. Yeah, 100%. It feels off, then they're putting a lot of emphasis on that, though. They already have, like I said, they have the prequel book. There's tons of information on the website. They keep pumping out more. So there you go. Taris, welcome. Just got here. What are we talking about right now? Exodus, a new Exodus information. But that's the bulk of the new information that came out from the recent developer Q&A. It's something that I can't help but keep getting excited about. I can't help getting more and more excited about. Someone earlier, I saw a comment that said something like the bears, the Awakened, I believe they're called. Yes, they have sci-fi bears that can talk, and they worked as battlefield medics, and they did this with a bunch of different animals. I like that kind of comical stuff. You know, when you play D&D long enough, you sort of need that gimmicky, weird things thrown in there. And that's the perfect balance for someone like me to say, hey, get your goofy thing. Why not have a talking medic combat bear? Sure. Right. That's my take on it. I took the bait for them to tear at my heartstrings, and it was such a letdown. Yeah, I mean, well, for what it's worth, I wasn't surprised when the parents in Starfield were a bit of a letdown, or they didn't have too much going on, just because it was that optional trait that you can pull in. So they knew they couldn't put too much time in it because a lot of players might not pick that trait, right? So a little bit more understandable in that sense. KOTOR could be either. KOTOR 2 is in the middle. I've never finished KOTOR 2. I've done KOTOR 1, which I enjoyed. However, by the time I played KOTOR, it was so long after it was last year I beat KOTOR for the first time ever. And, yeah, the story, what once was this original, like, masterpiece story that KOTOR was at the time, and for long after that, has now been done. So, unfortunately, it kind of lost some of that metal for me. But welcome, Taris. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm happy to have you here. But let me know your thoughts on Exodus. That's all I have for Exodus. Really excited to see more of that. I know that Chris, who had to step out for a bit, but I know that Chris was as well. So I'm upset that he missed the conversation. An unfinished masterpiece. Eventually, maybe not this year. This year's looking really busy. But eventually I will do my best to get to that. So, games. Video games are too goddamn big. I can't finish them. I'm tired. I'm old. I'm cranky. I don't have the attention span that I once did. I forgot I left this poll up. We're going to end that right now. I don't have the time to play many of these games. And it seems that Will Shen actually agrees with me. Will Shen, in a recent interview with Kiwi Talks, brought up the concept that games are too big. There's a lot of really interesting things in this interview. Tons of interesting things that came out of this interview. He talked a lot about studios and the size and the growing pains of them. Let me take a sip. Absinthe and tea, salted caramel. It's really, really good. Replace your G Fuel with this. I've never had G Fuel before. Will Shen said a lot of really interesting things. He talked about why he left the studio, that he needed to get out for a lot of different reasons. A lot of people say, yes, it was part of the ballooning of Bethesda. He actually made a really interesting point where he mentioned one of the reasons why Will Shen left, which, of course, you don't know who Will Shen is. He led massive projects. He was a big influential figure for Starfield. And also he was a big influence for Fallout 4, Far Harbor, and had many other influences in Bethesda and worked on a lot of projects. Started as an intern. He'd been there for over 20 years. So it was a big loss when he left, but he said it was tied to identity. Did he always want to be the Bethesda developer, or did he want to move on to something different? And one of the issues that he stated, and he wanted to move on to something different. He said he was having troubles with identity. Who was he? Which is a good problem to have when you have so many successes under your belt that he had while he was at Bethesda. But when you see conversations pop up, and they inevitably will, about people leaving Bethesda, keep in mind there's more reasons. Yes, the studio growing massively is a huge part of it, but there's other personal reasons that go into it too, which I think a lot of us overlook. We see the one headline, and this is important for any headline you see. See one headline, you see YouTubers and content creators running out the gates and drooling out, salivating to cover these stories. And I mean drooling to cover these stories, and then milking them as well. When anything relevant comes out, Starfield was bad. Well, Will Shen left because Bethesda was too big, and blah, blah, blah. They start screaming about it, and he left for other reasons, right? So keep that in mind with any story that you look into, just in general. We need to try to make gaming less, and gaming news less performative, less ballooning, less peacocking within in showcasing what's going on in the industry. But among some of his topics, he mentioned how the studio did get way too big. He raised some interesting psychological points about team management, where he stated, you know, the military is organized into groups of 7, because having teams larger than that, it's impossible. He mentioned which was an interesting concept. I didn't know. He mentioned how what you can only really know 125 people. That's it. That's all your brain, quite biologically, all your brain has capacity. There's studies that have been done on this, has room for 125 people. That includes family, coworkers, friends, past relationships, and all this other stuff that goes on. So quite literally, sometimes, you know, people make jokes about, oh, you just pushed information out, like I learned something new, something else left. That's literally true. And in this case, when you have a studio that goes from 100 developers, which is what, of course, Skyrim was and Oblivion was and all these other games that Bethesda worked on, and then suddenly bubbles up to 200, 300, thousands of employees, tens of thousands in other companies, right? It's just, these get to these insane games of incomprehensible scale and proportions. You lose a lot of what these games are special. Jonas, a lot of credit to Jonas, because this is exactly what he's been saying for the longest time. So, what does it say? What else do I have? I have some notes about this. Mostly notes on actually some of the next points that I'm going to talk about in relation to this topic. But when these studios get too big, it's impossible to manage, and you can't provide the same type of experience, because, and I'm quoting Jonas on this, people keep quitting the studios. They're all saying the same thing, because what happens is you have these camaraderies, and again, this is Jonas's, I'm paraphrasing Jonas's words, but you lose out on the tableside conversations where you're all sitting in the kitchen, you're going to get lunch together, you're hanging out after work because you have that sense of camaraderie, and then you start talking about ideas, and you have something come into head, and you're like, yeah, let's try that, that'd be really cool, and you start experimenting, right? Bethesda has, if you remember, after Skyrim came out, we've only seen this once. We've only seen once from Bethesda where they released their game jam. They said, we always do a game jam where we see what we could put in the game, and then some of that turns into DLC. If you remember that clip where they shared things such as There was the skeleton butler. There was the foundations of what would become Hearthfire kind of littered in there. Dark dungeons was thrown in there where it was just pitch black, moving platforms inside dungeons. So they had all these really interesting concepts. Those are the types of ideas that come when you're a small team that's just like, hey, let's play around with this. And you could actually execute on those. But when you grow to these studios of massive size, now you have to go through multiple layers of middle management. You have this idea to yourself, and it might go between your small group of people, but it can't get outside of that because it needs approval on so many different levels, and you're more concerned about budgets and this and that, and all these other layers that don't get added when you're a smaller studio. So unfortunately, this is one of the fears that I have for The Elder Scrolls 6. Hello, Remake Station 5. Remake Station 5. Hello, welcome to the stream. Do you know when PS... I see other chats too. PS will have a showcase again. It seems like Sony doesn't give them anymore. Unfortunately, no. But patience. When I always like to say when they're ready, right? The studio does care. I think it's always silly when people get hyperbolic about... But we're going to talk about showcases in a bit. But I think it's always silly when people get hyperbolic about this studio doesn't care, that doesn't care. If they're trying to finish a game story and lore to a game and sequels, then let's have big games. There's things I agree with what Will Shen is saying, and there's things I disagree with what Will Shen is saying. On the topic of big games, one of the things, so that's about ballooning development. I absolutely agree. I think there's 100% benefit to these smaller studios. And we have titles. Skyrim was built by like a 100-man team, and it is still one of the most played. Starfield, I looked at it before starting the stream. Starfield has, you want to make a 16 times joke? Not quite 16. Skyrim has 6 times the amount of players that Starfield has. 6 by game size. Will Shen talked about both. Will Shen talked about both game size as well as studio size. Right now we're talking about studio size. Starfield has, or Elder Scrolls Skyrim has 6 times the amount of players currently, right now, playing Elder Scrolls Skyrim over Starfield. Starfield had more employees. Starfield is, by all accounts, a bigger game. Objectively speaking, it is a bigger game. Doesn't make it better. And on top, part of that is because you don't have that camaraderie with the studio. So let's talk about game size, like game length, though, right? Let's talk about game length. Will Shen also specifically mentioned that there was these 30+ hour games people don't enjoy. He specifically mentioned there was a small indie game that I don't remember the name of. It was like a small indie horror game. You're stuck on a spaceship, and you're playing from like different characters' perspectives. Markiplier played it. Let me see if I can't find the title of this before. It was really, really popular. Really, really popular. And it had a very big following amongst its community. And part of the reason that Will Shen says that is because the game was short enough to finish. The game was short enough to finish. So you can build a community around it because people can actually beat it and they can see how it ends and they could discuss it in depth because it's not this 30 to 100 hour title that's meant to be endlessly replayable. Let's see if I could find it here. No, not click holding. Whoops. Alright, I can't find it right now, but really need indie game. And he said that's because people can actually finish it and get through it. There's certain games, Lethal Company? No, not Lethal Company, not Lethal Company. No, it was a different one. But there's room for these 30+ hour games, absolutely. There's also room for these smaller games. Again, it's one of those areas where I sort of agree and disagree with what Will Shen is saying. You know, something like Red Dead Redemption is a fantastic game. Something like Elder Scrolls 5 was designed around that way. He specifically mentions that Elder Scrolls and other titles sort of paved the way for these massive titles, and a lot of studios just kept trying to do it. What I think the actual problem isn't that these 30+ hour games exist, or these 100+ hour games exist. I think the problem is it's the same exact conversation with live service titles. The problem is studios were seeing, look at all this player feedback that we're seeing, and this engagement that we're getting with a game like Skyrim. And then they automatically jump on the idea that we need to make these massive open worlds. We need to make these huge games. We need to make them endlessly replayable. Sound familiar? Starfield's going to last 10 years. And what happens then is we get such an overwhelming amount of these types of titles that players start checking out. And that's when you get things like Ubisoft and the repetitive open world formulas that those games carry through. And so that's when you get games like Starfield that are built to be these massive, endlessly replayable open world experiences that aren't as exciting. They don't hold the same charm, which is unfortunate. Then you get a bloat, you get an influx of these open world games. We saw it with live service. We saw it with, for example, Battle Royale, right? You had Fortnite, you had PUBG, then you had an explosion. There's still some, there's still some that do really well. Hunt Showdown, just released on Game Pass, is a great example of this. But you just get these massive flood of titles, and then people's interests change, because look at superhero fatigue is another great example. People say superhero fatigue doesn't exist. It's just because the Marvel quality. Notice how my brain goes right to Marvel. Just because the movie quality dipped. That's 100% true. But it's also the style, the tone, right? If we are using Marvel as the benchmark there. The fact that they all kind of had that. Everyone had one last one-liner. It's all witty, it's comedy, it's bright, it's colorful. People wanted darker stuff. So people get tired of the themes as well. But we see this influx, and then we see trends change. People want smaller games. Eventually, we're going to see the end. Everything. History repeats itself, ladies and gentlemen. That's what I'll say about that. Skyrim story was about 10 to 15 hours for the main. Yes, it was, but there's so much to do outside of that. And notice how in most Bethesda games, people don't, and Bethesda's aware of this, most people don't really go just for the main story. Elder Scrolls will be fine. It will sell a ton. Probably, 100%, and it will be on Game Pass, yes. It might not repeat, but it definitely rhymes. See, you can't argue when Jonas says something. That's why I always like Jonas being here. Wasn't Skyrim like 10 to 15 hours for the main? Yeah, it was short. But they know, Bethesda knows, and they're aware of this, that people often don't even interact with the main story. They don't complete it. They go off and do other things. I myself have hundreds of hours in Skyrim. Not as many as some people, but I have a lot. And I've never completed the main quest. I've never completed any of the DLC's main quests. But I keep going back and playing Skyrim. So, what I'm missing here. Yeah, Skyrim, Fallout 4, people keep going back to these games. Versus something like Starfield, where the idea was, let's make the game, and we heard these comments from Todd Howard, let's make the games playable for 10 years. Let's make sure these games last 10 plus years for people. Well, unfortunately, that doesn't work out, because what happens, and again, credit to Jonas, is this is the way that he phrased it. What happens then is you're not building worlds, you're building sandboxes. You know, you get a lot of things that end up going into these games in order to make them endlessly replayable or more replayable. That's when you have the settlement system, which I think is a good system. I like the settlement system. But does it fit in every single Bethesda game from now into the future because they did it in Fallout 4 and people liked it? No. Does it feel tacked on to Starfield? Yes. Exactly, FarkU. You understand. If you try to get between me and my fantasy and my Elder Scrolls, you are going to lose. Thank you, Jonas. Yeah, get that message out of here. If you try to get between me and my Elder Scrolls, we're gonna start having issues. No, I don't care. Everyone can like what they want. I don't care. You can like what they want, but fantasy is better. So you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're wrong, is what it comes down to. So yeah, the other thing too is when you start adding in all these mechanics, we'll wrap up about the Will Shen interview in just a little bit. But the other thing about some of this stuff too is making these big games often results in diluted content. So that's where you start to see things like the camping, the settlement building, the survival modes, and you start seeing diluted content, right? And that's, again, it goes back to Ubisoft content, diluted content. Thank you for stopping by, Morgan. It was a pleasure to have you here, and thank you so much for contributing to the show and adding a lot, and talking, conversing, and adding some really cool things and insights. So I hope you have a wonderful night. Yeah, so Skyrim, Elder Scrolls 6, Skyrim didn't try to be a city builder. Skyrim didn't try to be a procedural generated mess. It didn't try to do endless exploration. It didn't try to be a survival game. Do these elements work in a game like Skyrim? Yeah, absolutely. We saw plenty of mods for survival mode. They had the official creation for survival mode. So these things work, but the game wasn't built for that. It was built to be a good game, and these other elements can get added on later. So ultimately, you don't want to dilute the experience. You don't want to dilute the experience. And that's what happens when you're trying to be a sandbox. It gets diluted. Some people will gravitate towards something. Some people will gravitate towards others. But ultimately, I think in the case of Starfield, nobody was really happy with the complete package. So no more sandbox experiences. No more 10-year games. No more endlessly replayable. Just make a good game. And then, yeah, all the systems feel disjointed. Like the settlement system in Starfield felt incredibly disjointed from the rest of the game because it was tacked on a bit. So that's all for that. But I agree with most of what Will Shen said. I disagree as well. There's room for these other big experiences. So now, drum roll as we get into probably the main. We have 3 big topics for today. And we're getting through at a pretty good pace as well. We're about to hit 8 o'clock. Hello, my peeps. Hello, Showtime. Thank you so much for stopping by. How are you tonight? With the next Elder Scrolls, I really do think they'll be trying to add a at Fallout 76 type mode. I don't think so. I don't know about that. I really don't. I think Elder Scrolls 6 is going to try to be what I think Elder Scrolls, if we're going to just take a pause and talk about Elder Scrolls 6 for just 1 minute, I think their big mechanic is going to be really ships and some kind of ship combat. That's my personal guess. Do I think that works in an Elder Scrolls game? Yeah, sure. But again, it's one of those things where I look at it and go, is it cool conceptually? When you think about Starfield as a concept, it's very, very cool. When you think about Starfield as a concept, it is really, really cool. When you look at Starfield in practice, not so much, in my opinion. It fell short in a lot of ways. When I think about, like, hey, you could have your own ships and do naval battles in Elder Scrolls 6. You could build... What if they turn it into like Elder Scrolls Castles just released? Take inspiration, or Elder Scrolls Blades, you're building up a city again. We have mods like Helgen Reborn, right, that do that. Kvatch Reborn for Oblivion. There's mods that rebuild these cities that get destroyed. Those are really cool things. But when you actually get down to how they play out, because there's limitations in game development is really what it comes down to, they don't come out in execution as cool as they sound in theory. So yeah, I would love to have awesome 6-ship combat. I would love to have awesome build your own city and rule it as the king and make decisions Dragon Age Inquisition style. That'd be sick. Do I think it can all be pulled off in one single game and be done well? Not exactly. And Taris, echoing your points, theory and application are not the same. Bethesda needs to hire more people. They don't need to, they've already have enough people. What they need to do is they need to split into 2 separate teams. That's all they need to do. They need to have an Elder Scrolls team. They need to have a Fallout team. They need to let people bounce around between projects. Growth is their current issue. They need to have people bouncing between those projects. They need to divide so they could have those smaller games. Skyrim was as great as it is because it was a small team. But we do have to move on to the next subject. So that is the Xbox Showcase. The Xbox Showcase is coming January 23rd. Thursday, a Thursday at 10 a.m. Really, Microsoft? Really? Why at 10 a.m.? Come on. You're doing me dirty there. So I will not be able to cover it, unfortunately. I will be, surprise, at work like most people. And in fact, really puts me at a disadvantage to cover it. But what we know about it so far officially is really quite exciting. First and foremost, we do have confirmation that it's going to be primarily focused on id Software and Doom the Dark Ages, Compulsion Games, as well as Expedition 33, as well as one mystery game. Now, initially, people were stating, hey, the Oblivion Remaster? From Virtuos? That's probably one of the worst kept secrets. Unfortunately not. We actually have here, this is coming from Shinobi over on Reset Era, and this is the kind of leak that I like. I appreciate these types of leaks, where he said, the fourth mystery game is Oblivion, right? Said, nope, I'll save everyone the time now. No. And he does have the verified patch right here. So, it's the kind of thing, that's the kind of leak I like, because it does help to set expectations. Of course, Xbox and Microsoft and Bethesda aren't going to come out and say, hey, no, sorry, it's not an Oblivion remake, because especially if there is really one, I think there is, but especially if there is a real one, they're not going to comment on it either way. So, thank you, Shinobi. That's a good leak, in my opinion. That leads to the question what it could be. I know some people are now speculating, hey, it could be the next ZeniMax Online game. Maybe. I'm not too confident in that either. They've been working on it for, I think, 6+ years now. And we do know that that was also part of the same leaks where the Oblivion Remaster came from. Is it possible? Yes, I'm not too confident. I think it's going to be another single-player game. Also, people are speculating whether or not there will be a 5th surprise game. I believe last year they had a 5th game, but maybe that could be the Oblivion remake. Again, Shinobi didn't say that there's not a 5th game. He just said that the 4th game is an Oblivion remake. So if you want to hold on to your hopium, bottle up, just... You really need to just suck it up and hold it in. Maybe they'll have a surprise 5th game and it's going to be the Oblivion Remaster. Probably not. But you can hope. You can get excited for it. I'm going to keep my expectations lower. The big issue that everyone is having, every single person on the planet is pissed off. They're angry. They're mad. They don't know what's going on. Let's get some gameplay going on here for you guys to watch. The thing that everyone is pissed off at is, and we have the appropriate PlayStation logo in the corner here for the Xbox Showcase. Let's get this in higher quality. Everyone is confused and frustrated, and Xbox sucks at marketing, and they have no idea what they're doing, and they're clueless, and Phil Spencer's garbage, and Satya Nadella is human garbage, and everyone, Xbox is, they're trying to make sure that they don't do good. What am I talking about? Well, really curious for Xbox is they're not talking about Fable or Avowed. Wonder why. I think 2 reasons. One, these are games that, I'm going to be brutally honest, Expedition 33, as well as Doom the Dark Ages, which is getting its first preview. That's obviously the big highlight, right? And then South of Midnight. Those are 3 games that I firmly believe need the attention a lot more. And maybe this is controversial, but those games need the attention a lot more than Fable or Avowed do. Simple reality. Avowed, yes, remake. We've already seen a lot of Avowed. We've already seen a good amount of Avowed. There's tons of gameplay out there. We know the story details. And honestly, that's something that can go out on its own. At this point, people who are looking... At this stage, you know if you're interested in Avowed or not. And showing it at this showcase is not something that is going to convince you suddenly that Avowed is the game for you. Right? I think that's probably the best way to phrase it. Same with Fable, we haven't seen enough of yet. We definitely need more. But what I will say is Fable, again, it's another situation where it's an established franchise. People who like Fable are going to be excited for Fable. We're aware that it's out there. It can do something on its own. These are smaller projects, and I'm honestly grateful to Microsoft for showing these and not overshadowing them by a Fable. Because let's be honest, that would completely and utterly steal the show partially, I don't think from Doom. I think Doom is probably safe because it is the type of game that is so vastly different because of it. I mean, the first person rapidly paced shooter, right? Different audiences, but it would absolutely obscure a game like South of Midnight. It would absolutely obscure, right? Expedition 33. It would absolutely obscure Expedition 33. Overshadow is what I mean to say. So there you go. I'm excited. Missed rumors that there's Roundhouse. Yes, very good point. I have seen some of those. I don't know what it would be though, because I can't remember 100%. This is why I do need a co-host. I say Roundhouse? Roundhouse or Double Fine. Yeah, I don't know what Roundhouse might be working on. Double Fine as well. I'm not sure what they might be working on. Double Fine is always an interesting one because it's not a studio that I have a lot of attachment to. People can get mad at me for that. That's totally fine. Feel free to rage. I don't have a lot of I've never played Psychonauts. I haven't done Iron Brigade. I haven't done what's some of their other... Grim Fandango was a big one. Brutal Legend. I don't know. I don't know why I've never gotten into Double Fine. Sorry. Sorry, Double Fine. But I know a lot of people really like those types of games. I know a lot of massive fans of Psychonauts. Personally, out of this showcase, Doom the Dark Ages is going to be the highlight for me. Cannot wait to see more Doom. Can't wait. And as far as turn-based RPGs go, Expedition 33, I saw a couple of you. I think Taris, you were one of them. Influent. There you go. Expedition. Welcome to the show, by the way. Thank you for stopping by. This is 1,000. I cannot wait to see. It is beautiful. It looks cinematic as hell. I like turn-based games, and this is one that I think will absolutely fit into a lot of people's... And just the world. You could see from the footage that is playing, it looks really damn cool. The environments, the artwork, the style, the creature design, the aesthetics, all of that stuff. Massive Chalice is one of their best games, a strategy game. I would check out Massive Chalice. I'm a big fan of strategy games. Expedition 33 looks great. I'm really happy, too, that Expedition 33 is getting the attention that it is getting. Now, yes or no, do you think that there's going to be... Let's put out this short poll here. Just yes or no. Do you think that there's going to be a surprise 5th game that appears? As long as the 4th game is a 2025 game, I'm okay. Probably. I have a hunch, yes. Although, I could see no, to be honest. Yes, but also no. I'm very indecisive with things like release dates. That's just how I go. Honestly, there's so many games. The reason why I say it that way is because there's so many games that are coming out in 2024. Speaking of games coming... Or 2025, excuse me. Speaking of games coming out in 2025, let's just pull up this list here. I have a list. This is coming from Shinobi. There's 27 games here. Ghost of Yotai, Fable, Outer Worlds, Yakuza, Split Fiction, Wolf Among Us 2, Slay the Spire 2, great indie game, Elden Ring, Night Rain, which is its own game, Civilization 7, Avowed, Judas, Mafia, Kingdom Come, South of Midnight. You can see the rest of Pokemon. Replaced is what I'm incredibly looking forward to. We are eating 1943. I can't wait to see more of. Doom the Dark Doom. I can't wait for more Doom. All of these titles, like, it is a real... There's something truly for everybody. That's wrong. You can always need more fat. You could want more fat. I don't think you need more fat. I could use more fat. I'm a tiny guy, but holy hell, we're eating good. And this isn't including a lot of Switch 2 into account. Right? He says right here, if you guys can read it. I know it's small for you, but this is, even if it's just 50% of what we're getting, it's a stellar year. Grand Theft Auto 6. I mean, for God's sake, that game is already projected to make $1 billion. We've seen one trailer for it so far. Most of you think there's going to be no surprise 5th game. I agree. I don't think there's going to be a 5th one, personally. But having Avowed there now would be what's called butter on bacon, as in it's already so fatty, there's no need to add more onto it. Oh, that's what you were talking about. Butter on the bacon. Have you ever put butter on a Pop-Tart? It's so freaking good. If you haven't put butter on a Pop-Tart, I think you should. Ugh. So there you go. I'm excited. I'm personally. Let me know what is, if there's one surprise game that's coming. Chat? Let me know, what is the one game that you are hoping to see? What do you want to see coming from this surprise? Out of curiosity. Mine would honest, if I could pick one, I would say the Oblivion remake, but knowing that we're not getting that, Redfall 2. Ooh. Fallout 3, I know, the remake, the Bethesda remakes. I get it. Trust me, I get it. It's not happening. It's not coming. We already have confirmation of that. It's not coming. I want to see Contraband. Anybody? Contraband? It's been how long since that game was? Realistically, I would take Elder Scrolls 6. I know that's not happening either. But that's Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be saved for a bigger event. You and Maddie. Maddie always believes. I love Maddie. I would love to do something with Maddie. I think that Maddie and I would get along great. I think we would. There's my ego. Arc 2 news. Oh, Arc 2. Yeah. Arc 2 would be really cool. I just thought of Crimson Desert, but I don't think that's tied to Xbox at all. So that would be really surprising. But Crimson Desert's one that I am really excited for. Very much excited for. All really good games. Maddie always thinks every single time there's like a remaster going on, he's like, Fallout 3. I mean, like, Fallout is his thing. The way Elder Scrolls is my thing, Fallout is his thing. And man, I would love to do a show with Mr. Maddie. Maybe one day. Maybe one day. Arc 2 would be really cool. Killer Instinct. Be nice. Welcome to the show. Thank you for dropping by. Thank you for sending in a chat message as well, interacting with the community here. Killer Instinct 2. Killer Instinct 2. I really did. I enjoyed Killer Instinct. That was a solid... Killer Instinct, correct me if I'm wrong on the timing of this, but that was a game that was right around the time when Game Pass came out, right? That was like one of the first Game Pass titles. And it was a really good game for Game Pass as well. I remember that was sort of a big focal point for Microsoft. At least it felt like it was when we first started seeing some Killer Instinct stuff. And it had a good following to it as well. And then it just sort of... poof. Rare's new game. That's the one, ladies and gentlemen. I would like it to be Rare. What? I can't even remember. Everwild. Yes, please. Everwild. Sea of Cheese. I really do want to play Sea of Thieves again. I would love to see Everwild. Because the exact quote, what was the exact quote? They said a visit to a surprise studio, right? At first, when I had read that, someone corrected me. At first, when I had read that, I interpreted as a surprise studio, something that is new, you haven't heard before, right? And it's going to be, but they just said a surprise visit from a studio. So I got corrected on that one. Jonas corrected me. Thank you, Jonas. No surprise. Yeah, that's why, Jonas, we're gonna get you when you co-host, Jonas, you could argue and be correct about everything, and I will sit here like a bumbling fool. Yeah? Cool. Sounds good. That was a yes. Anyway. All good games. I'm excited. I'm glad that But moral of the story is, when you see people complaining about the marketing, that's the biggest complaint I saw, was people complaining Fable wasn't there, Outer Worlds wasn't there, and Fable, Outer Worlds, Avowed, all of the games. I don't know how Obsidian is doing it, I gotta be honest. How is Obsidian doing 2 games? How can Obsidian do 2 games simultaneously, and Bethesda can't figure out how to release... What was it? It was the trailer has been out as long as, like, Skyrim, between Skyrim's announcement and the trailer. It's now longer than that, from the trailer to now. It's insanity. When can Bethesda figure it out? Like Obsidian is. And why does Obsidian... It seems like Obsidian gets more creative freedom as well, at least for the time being. Seems like Obsidian is getting more creative freedom than Bethesda. Maybe it just needs more time in the oven from Bethesda, because they need to work on some of these other projects. But I look back at Tango and Tango getting the axe. Obsidian can work on Grounded, they can work on Pentiment, they could have 2 games going simultaneously. But Bethesda Game Studios has taken so many years. 2011, so 2025, 14 years. 14 years between Elder Scrolls games. And something like Tango, which was part of, not Bethesda Game Studios, but was part of Bethesda, that was doing experimental titles like Hi-Fi Rush that did really, really well. They get to get... I don't understand. That's the confusing part about Microsoft to me. That is more confusing to me about Microsoft than them not showing the Outer Worlds or Avowed at this showcase. So do with that what you will. All right. When I co-host, did I miss something? Didn't sign a contract. Am I getting paid? I'll pay. I'll pay. Whatever revenue comes from the streams, it's all yours. All 10 cents. You can have it. My gift. All right. In other news, our last topic for today, in other news, this is a segment where we just kind of hang out and chat about whatever. You'll notice that kind of the flow of the show, I try to stay on topic when I'm talking about something. I am mostly on the subject, getting my thoughts out, and then I turn to chat occasionally. That is intentional. Now we're in other news. This is the chance to go back to anything that we talked about, anything that you want more on. But while you guys maybe think of some questions or other topics you might want to discuss for the day, I like to use this opportunity to really talk about some news that's going on in other places in the industry. In particular, not necessarily gaming related. So in particular, one really cool thing that I think this is pretty neat when something like this happens, is, let's pull it up here. Mass Effect voice actors should return, and Jennifer Hale actually said that she would return. We know that Mass Effect show is in the works over at Amazon MGM. And Jennifer Hale actually said that she would love to be a part of it in some capacity. And she actually said I would like to see other voice actors and other actors for the original trilogy come back to work on this as well. That's something super cool to me. And I hope it works out. I love that Jennifer Hale has this enthusiasm. There's certain times where you get like a Henry Cavill who's so attached to Geralt, and he left the show because they were disrespecting the character and they were disrespecting the source material, and he was that passionate about it. Now he's going in and doing his Warhammer show, which is very exciting to see. So sometimes you get these actors who are so passionate about the roles. Jennifer Hale coming back and willing to do more Shepard is certainly in that bucket for me. And I would love to see, for example, Garrus, I forget his voice actor. He's in Avowed now. He's playing one of the main companions in Avowed. I would love to see, it says right here, Ali Hillis as Liara Tassoni, right? Lance as Admiral Stephen Hackett. Brendan Keener as Garrus. To see some of these people come back and reprise these roles to really add to the authenticity, I think is a pretty cool thing. So if you're a fan of Mass Effect, you're looking forward to the TV show, I'm cautiously optimistic. Of course, Henry Cavill is Shepard, right? That's the obvious casting choice, but there you go. Have I seen the Wayward Realms? Yes, the Wayward Realms looks interesting to me. The Wayward Realms is one that I have trouble getting excited over because it's a lot of, if I'm thinking of the right game, it's a lot of AI that's driving a lot of it. And when they showcased gameplay, I know it has a long way to go, so maybe it can start to shape up. I know, for example, Go for Vids is very excited for it because it is trying to achieve some of that old school Morrowind feel. Or not Morrowind, I'm sorry, some of that Arena and Daggerfall feel. Maybe those games just aren't for me, and that level of generation just isn't for me. I think it's not, because I've always gravitated more towards handcrafted, towards story-driven stuff. I think conceptually, again, it goes back to the conversation we had earlier. Conceptually, very, very cool. On paper, it just never sits with me. It never hits the way that I want it to. It always feels just artificial, is probably one of the best words I could use to explain it. So it looks cool. I'm going to keep my eye on it for sure. 100% Terrace, I'm going to keep my eyes on it, but not something that explicitly I'm more excited for Exodus than I am for Wayward Realms. And I've only just started really paying closer attention to Exodus. So I have like surface knowledge level of both of them, and Exodus gets me more excited. Same with like Crimson Desert. I have surface level knowledge of Crimson Desert, but that I would say at the moment, based on what I've seen, I'm more excited about. If this is the direct lineup, what do they show off this summer? My guess is Outer Worlds 2 and Gears. I think a Gears collection, right? That was the rumor at one of the last shows, was sort of a Gear remastered. So absolutely at a showcase, I would expect to see Gears. At a bigger showcase is when I would expect to see, honestly, I think Xbox and Microsoft could really kill it by doing sort of a double feature of Elder Scrolls 6 and an Oblivion remake in the same summer showcase. And some people are going to say that's a bit controversial, but one, I think we're actually not seeing Elder Scrolls 6 this year, if I'm going to give my brutally honest opinion. I do not think we're seeing it this year, so there's that. But the Oblivion Remaster, in my opinion, deserves a bigger show floor than this developer direct, and that would be that. I would also say that to the Gears collection. Again, I would even argue as far as a mystery game, this would be a good opportunity. I remembered Rare's game, but I would be interested to kind of see it teased now and featured later. When is Fable's release date set to be? Do we have a concrete? December 31st. So Fable is probably going to be one, unless that's just a placeholder date that the auto answer is giving me. I think that might just be a placeholder. It's expected to launch in 2025. Do we have a release date for this? Doesn't look like it. Okay, so so I think Fable is going to probably be one of the highlights for the show. So that's definitely another one that would be featured prominently there. Outer Worlds 2, I don't think has a release date either. My memory is always bad when it comes to release dates. Yeah, Outer Worlds 2 is no release date as far as I could see, just on a quick glance. So Outer Worlds 2, Fable, Oblivion Remake, you already have a really, and then if they did Gears remastered, you have a really good showcase. A really good showcase from those three games alone. That's not including any secret surprises that they got working on. Have you seen Luke Dale on X? He's so proud of his role. I haven't seen Luke Dale because I don't have a lot of Kingdom Come Deliverance coming up in my feed, unfortunately. There goes water all over my floor. It's fine. It's just water. I don't have a lot of Kingdom Come Deliverance coming up in my Twitter feed because Twitter is a toxic wasteland. So there you go. I will not be streaming Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I'm sorry, Taris, because I've not played nor finished Kingdom. I've played I have not gotten anywhere close to finishing Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. And it is 1000% a game that I want to play to be able to appreciate what Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 does, as far as the progression in the gameplay systems. Oh, also slightly related to just things I care about as well. Really quick. Congrats to Penguin, Colin Farrell, and the Penguin TV show for winning Golden Globes, I believe it was. I didn't watch the showcase, but I did see the aftermath of it. So congratulations to Penguin. If you haven't watched Penguin, it's a really good show. You don't have to like Batman. It has nothing to do with Batman. It just takes place in Gotham with Batman-named characters. But really good show, and they did win that. So that was really exciting. But anyway, no to Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 stream. But that about does it for the show. Thank you guys so much, unless there's any last minute chats or questions that do come through. But this was a really fun one. We had a lot of people. Be Nice, thank you for being here. Remake, thank you as well. Taris, Jonas for sticking by. Morgan, Chris Harris, Arcane, Red Wolf, Holly, Fark You, Lancelot. Who am I missing? Shadow Dragon, Infinity, Grey Monad, Jeremy as well. Jeremy. Scrolling. Daedric for stopping by. Just Dom for stopping by. Daedric, it was great to see you again. So Jeremy, yeah, you're still here. Thank you for being here. Thank you guys so much for being here for tonight's show. It was a wonderful show. I had a great time chatting with all of you. Look forward to next week. I think that this 6:30-ish, right in between 6:30. First time here. Welcome. I hope you had fun. The format of this show is going to continue to change. First off, I'm open to having a co-host on the show because I think it works better. As much as I like to kind of have my voice out there, I think it does work better with the co-host to have that banter. So I'm completely open to that. And the format might change. I don't know if I'm going to keep the way that I have the topics. I like the idea of having the topics, but who knows if that's going to stay. The change in the format's going to change. The change in the format. The style in the format will change over time. But anyway, Fark You, thank you for being here as well. Have a great night, everybody. And as always, I hope to see you all next time. So long, everybody. Now I get to awkwardly stare at you because I don't have an ending soon screen. So I'm just gonna do this. Just gonna a little bit of, have a great night. It's wonderful having you here. I love all of you. You're the best. You make this worthwhile. And I hope you're having a good new year. And if not, come hang out next week. Too close. All right. That's good. Have a good night, everybody.